Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to TFT, Tarot for Today, Divine Dabblings with
Oberon.
me, Banshee. And this is our July 2025 U.S. prediction update. Not doing a world update this time. There's just been so much happening in the U.S., though. We want to see how things are going to turn out from now to the end of 2025. And we're going to tackle specific issues that we think are important ones. We had to pick and choose some, and we collaborated and came up with some, right?
Right, and thanks for that introduction.
You're welcome.
Mhm.
So basically, the world predictions, the world is going to be mentioned here in a few cases. You'll see it come up. And we're going to do a little bit of a recap of a few things we got right with the U.S. predictions at the beginning of 2025.
Right, exactly. We did these predictions pretty much at the beginning of the year, and there were a number of topics. We've selected the ones we thought were the most worthy of an update. You can actually go to a playlist on our YouTube channel that is about U.S. world predictions. We do this annually and sometimes semi-annually. This year, we definitely wanted to do it semi-annually.
Well, at least the U.S. ones.
Mm-hmm.
It was complicated, a big massive, it was part one and part two for the world and the U.S. We're only looking at certain issues right now, and we're going to draw 3 cards for each and just call it like we see them. A few of the questions, I believe it's about 3 of the questions, have a part 1 and a part 2 to them. And we'll end with a particular yes-no question.
So first we will do our recap from the earlier part of the year, and that first topic was the U.S. and Middle East relations.
Yes, and for that reading we have the Queen of Swords reversed, the Emperor reversed, and the Lover reversed. They were all bad with the U.S. and Middle East. And, what can you say about the Emperor reversed, right?
Right, who's in charge?
Who could it be, though? Who could be causing the problems here, making bad decisions, poor judgment, unethical moves? Well, we're not going to say Netanyahu in this case per se, or the Iranian leader, because this is about how the U.S. related to the Middle East. It's clear to me it's our president that is that.
To some degree, the blame can be shared with nearly all of these actors, and the Queen of Swords reversed maybe points to that. The idea that certain people will make decisions they feel are best for them, come hell or high water, no matter what the conflicts are or what the, I'm trying to think of, the opposition might indicate.
Trump made the unethical decision to go after Iran when Israel was fighting Iran. Trump made that bad decision. Maybe inspired by certain members of his cabinet. Can't rule that out, of course, and also we cannot rule out the manipulation coming from Israel in that regard, too. Israel wanted us to take out their nuclear reactors. Trump wanted a win. But then again, Trump also wanted to be up for a Nobel Peace Prize this year. So I don't think that's going to happen.
Sure hope not. But
bad decisions.
The whole idea of the Lover's Reverse talks about bad decisions, about people maybe end up finding out that the decision they made was really not the right one. Whether or not that happens in this case, hard to say.
Let's move on. U.S. and Israel. We have Justice reversed, King of Cups reversed, and the King of Wands reversed.
Holy reverse-a-palooza.
Exactly, Mr. O. Look at that. For all the things with the Middle East and the U.S. relating to them, all reversals. And so with U.S. and Israel, what do we got going here? We got 2 possible leaders, kings, right, that seem to be a bit out of control in various ways. Somebody not emotionally together or well, maybe, and somebody else who's just making aggressive, nasty moves. And justice reversed. There are a lot of injustice that these 2 leaders were fomenting with each other.
There's really very little I can add to this. I think it is what it is.
So I think we've seen that play out, that Netanyahu and the U.S. have been messing with Gaza, and they have been messing with Iran.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
and a couple other places in between.
Oh, yeah. Now for a complete turnaround, let's look at the U.S. and Russia. We have the Queen of Pentacles upright. We have the Eight of Pentacles upright. And we have Judgment upright. Seems as though U.S. is changing and revisioning, reincarnating their relations with Russia. Everything seems to be working more advantageously, or complementary with Russia. The Queen of Pentacles, is money involved in some way?
Well, certainly it would seem to be, and I'm not as up on these kind of events as you. I don't necessarily believe that everything is totally rosy right now, that there is some amount of carpet baggage. But on the other hand, our president went to the G7 summit and really, tried to plead Putin's case to be allowed back in.
That's right.
And why Russia is, not the horrible, person that the G7 and others may think.
And they could have sanctioned Russia more for some of the civilian bombing targets Russia took out in Ukraine, but they didn't do it. They wouldn't go there. They want more of a working relationship with Russia. And so that's pretty much it, except for one other thing. I didn't get into a lot of the domestic issue recap, but one thing I will say that stood out to me as I look back at it is that everything seemed so happy, joy as far as politics and government went. And we see millions of people protesting for so long now during these months since against the policies of the government, against the rights that are being taken away from a lot of people, against the people being arrested, on the streets, the immigrants, the non-documented people, and some documented people. So, what it puzzled me at first, but then I realized why it was so hunky-dory is because, number one, Trump's followers haven't budged much in their support of him, and number two, all the government is all in his pocket. They agree to get along. They pass his bills. The Supreme Court, is bucking the Constitution, literally. Constitutional lawyers will tell you this, and giving Trump almost the rights of a king.
Well, at the beginning of this, you mentioned, the activity of protesters,
Yes.
or various, efforts to show opposition to that side of the politics. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to note that a lot of statisticians and other people in sociology, et cetera, feel there's a 3.54% rule that indicates when you have this much of an actual meter protest or indication of strong opinions, it indicates many more beyond that. It's a threshold kind of way of looking at it. And the recent, protests from last month, that mobilized possibly up to 11 million people have in fact reached that threshold. But that was a month ago, and very little has happened since then.
Okay, that's it. That's what we have for the recap. We spent a little more time on that than I thought, so let's move on to the 3-card readings. Right. That'll be for each of the questions that are up and coming. The first one is, do you want to read that one?
How is the trade war with other countries, the tariffs and current U.S. economic policies, going to affect the U.S. economy?
Okay, and we have a part 2 to this question, but we'll tackle this first. We're going to shuffle the cards each time for each question, but for the part 2, we'll just take the next 3 cards. So keep part 2 in mind also while you're shuffling, Mr. O, and we'll explain what that question is later, but it's related.
Right.
All right. Okay, here we go. So the trade war with other countries, the tariffs, and our economic policies. How's it going to affect our economy? How's it going to affect jobs? How's it going to affect pricing? All of this stuff, will be mentioned here. And this, of course, is from now till the end of the year. It's okay. I guess that part won't matter, will it?
Well,
okay.
Technically it won't.
It won't. All right. Well, the Ace of Swords is upright. The Knight of Pentacles is reversed. The King of Wands is here. The King of Wands is reversed as well. Interesting cards. I think here it's clear the economy is going to slow down, possibly dramatically. You know, the Knight of Wands is here. That's the first thing that struck me. There's going to be a major slowdown. There's going to be some money losses. There could be job losses because that can come up. I think here, well, I want to stop. I'll let you see what you see
I can't
first, too.
disagree with that Knight of Pentacles. That definitely indicates maybe some sort of sluggishness. It could also talk about the idea that maybe there's a stagnation in other respects too, you know, morale, etc. Since we did say this was about a trade war, when the Ace of Swords shows up, there is always a sense of something like a war.
Battle.
This could be saying that the battle is enjoying, you know, the Ace of Swords indicates it's really just beginning at this point. It will be what actually will happen. And there may be braver efforts to try to overtake the goal, i.e., cause whatever those effects are in the economy, bring manufacturing back to the U.S., or things of that
They
sort.
say that can't happen. It's certainly not going to happen by the end of 2023.
Certainly not.
Let's face that. But the bottom line is that maybe what I'm thinking here, Mr. O, is maybe some other countries may come up with some clever ways of trying to deal with the tariff wars, you know? This could also herald a new beginning of a Cold War in a way, a Cold War in economic conditions. Why do I feel that way? Because this is about a victory, you know? This is about a victory, but it is leading to economic downturn here. So whose victory is it? I wonder.
That's
Whose
very good
victory
because
is
actually in the back of my head was the idea that this represented innovation of some sort. I wasn't clear if it represented American innovation other than maybe people who are in the classes or areas that are most affected and may need to strategize, innovate for their own economy. But I like what you said because it could very well be other nations or other actors who are figuring a way around the tariffs.
It could be corporate America and farmers too. Farmers are going to have to do what they want. When I look at this card reversed as well, just because it looks like this is planting seeds, I think of the farmers too. I think about how they're going to be hurt by not just, you know, the tariffs, but the immigration policies as well, which we'll get to later. And of course, the King of Wands, the stubborn, arrogant leader who's operating out of his ego and maybe doesn't want to admit he's ever wrong.
I couldn't say it better there, but I can try. This is absolutely talking about the idea of somebody who really is not really capable of being a good leader. And, you know, we hear that often in reference to our president that he has only ever spoken to, fixated for, tried to reach his base. And his base is a very small base compared to the rest of voters. He seems to apparently not be there for duty for anyone else other than who he wishes to.
Do you think this
selfish?
Do you think, though, because we know what kind of leader he is, and he didn't get the moniker, you know, out on social media of Taco for no good reason, do you think he might backpedal on some of the stuff once things start to hit the fan, or try to?
What's the bottom card say?
The bottom card? We weren't going to do that. Oh, it could be that.
Could be, because this
he may have to backpedal.
Looks like, you know, good effects.
The Wheel of Fortune.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll see. You know, I'm not too confident he's going to backpedal soon enough. We're going to have some hurt. We're going to have some hurt.
That was totally improvised.
Now, that was, I see that. Now, what am I going to do with this card? Because we got to do part 2 here.
All right, part 2.
Part 2 is how the U.S. trade war is going to affect the world economy. So this is where we're bringing in a little bit of the world. Uh-oh. Well, it's the Five of Wands. The Five of Wands is reversed. The Ace of Cups is upright.
Upright.
Oopsie. And the Moon is reversed. Wow. This is interesting.
Well, that first card sort of looks like the immediate idea is that maybe there could... I know there are 2 ways of looking at this. Sometimes I feel like the reverse 501s does speak to overly competitive, but sometimes it sort of looks like maybe it's finding a way to work with the over competitiveness. In either case, that could be the case here. This could be saying other nations that don't normally work together may have to work together to figure out a way to shine the light where it needs to go, to lead the way where it needs to go.
It's interesting. I wonder here, because I'm looking at that Five of Wands reversed. Sometimes the Five of Wands is walking away from an argument, but what does that mean? I wonder here, I can think of two scenarios going forward, and maybe this sounds like a cop-out, but, I can see this as the world just deciding to go their own way, leaving this argument behind, seeking their happiness and their joy in the economy, by working together harmoniously with the countries that want to work harmoniously together. In other words, they may form another economic bloc to countermand, the fights that are going on here. We're going to find out. We're certainly going to find out. The other thing is maybe it's possible that they may back down. And they may just give in to Trump and, or the U.S. Let me just say the U.S. I'm sorry. And, we may find that out as well.
Well, in my scenario, which isn't incredibly different from yours,
Right.
these folks may walk towards each other as they walk away from us. And that, of course, does create a more emotional support group or bonding that says, hey, we can do this. We don't have to work with the USA. And, of course, in the finding out of that is sort of the sense of maybe realizing some anguish because of the emotional tolls here. And the moon especially speaks to the idea that maybe there is going to be some pain involved for us.
Yep. Well, this was about the world economy, but yeah, no, I hear.
All right.
All right, that's
So
it.
that was our first question. And now we will move on to question 2, which is a little bit more specifically about the United States. How will the budget bill that was just passed and signed affect people in this country this year? Thank you.
All right. So we just have that question. We don't have a part 2 to this. We'll see what we get. All right. Sorry. There.
Ready. I'll say that question again. How will the budget bill that was just passed and signed affect people in the U.S. this year?
We start with the Queen of Pentacles reversed.
We can stop now.
We can stop now. We continue with the Eight of Pentacles reversed.
Damn. Girl, we in trouble.
We start with the Four of Wands reversed, which is really interesting to me. The first thing I thought of as I saw that Four of Wands, and it just popped into my head,
There's nothing to party about.
The devil is in the details.
Ooh.
The details of what's behind this bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's take a look at this. The Queen of Pentacles is going to put a lot of us in a more precarious state. I didn't think a lot of this stuff was going to take effect right away, but maybe some of it is. And it's going to put a lot of us in a precarious state. We're going to have fears. We're going to have financial woes. Maybe we'll be holding back on spending. That's already been happening and may happen if the tariffs are instituted here like it looks like they will. So, It's going to affect a lot of things. And here, when you look at the Eight of Pentacles reversed, we have just maybe there's people getting laid off, jobs are coming apart, maybe small businesses are going to be affected. People are going to be struggling to figuring out how to work with this new reality, especially if you were relying on some of the benefits that may be cut this year. I'll stop there for now.
When I look at the Queen of Pentacles reversed, I think about the idea that our safety nets are being demolished and that the care or the self-care that people are able to give to themselves or to other people is diminished.
Yeah.
And of course, that's always the first casualty. Many years ago, many state legislators gave up mental health insurance and protection, and so now it's trickling down into other forms of care. This is not good. When I look at the Eight of Pentacles reversed, I feel a strong sense of incompetency being involved here, because normally the Eight of Pentacles sort of has that sense of being precise and being able to follow rules and orders and knowing how to work with a process. This would be the opposite of that. And of course, it could speak to the idea of so many incompetent people who have been placed in their positions, but it could also just be saying that as a community, the way this affects us is we realize we don't know or can't find or figure out what our best solutions will be.
And the other thing about this is everybody had said that bill was a hot mess. And the way they railroaded it through, some of them claiming, that's a nice easy way out to claim you didn't read your own bill, then how are you representing us if you're not reading what you're signing on for? So, the thing is, it was a hot mess. And it was all just out of fear that many people capitulated on passing something they knew would do many people harm. And some, of course, like Mr. O has said, they didn't care. They don't care.
Right.
And here, I feel the Four of Wands reversed to, an upright can also be about the foundations we're building here. These foundations are not on solid ground. This bill is not putting us in a better place. It's putting us more in debt. And also, this also talks about paying attention to the little details, the small little things that are hidden in that bill. And they're not to our advantage.
Well, another analogy of the Four of Wands, especially with this image, is it looks like a big inviting tent, but it's reversed, so therefore it is not very inviting,
not welcoming.
And so this may feel like people do feel isolated, not welcome, not really a part of the fabric that they should feel a part of.
Wow. All right, well, okay, so now we're going to go on to another scary topic, natural disasters. And the reason, seems pretty obvious why we're bringing this up now. Texas just had a terrible tragedy happen there. We're in the middle of hurricane season right now, and the only thing that's hit thus far is a tropical storm in North Carolina, and I'm not sure about any kind of damage or things that came from that yet. But we have to deal with wildfires, the many tornadoes and flooding episodes that are hitting the country.
Right, and the current budget and protocols is swiftly demolishing things that are helpful in terms of.
Well, it's going to tracking down and imprisoning immigrants.
Right, we've reallocated literally all the money towards that problem alone.
So at any rate, as far as this goes, we've got two parts to this question. The first part is, what may be in store for the U.S. as far as natural disasters go through December? We're going to just try to get a beat on what we see up and coming. And then the part two will talk more about the support victims can expect from the government. Okay, so part one. We're going to do our best here. This is not always easy to predict weather, in my mind, with the tarot, but I think it's possible. So we're going to give it a shot.
And you're more than welcome to leave your comments here or send them to our Gmail, tfttarotfortoday@gmail. Feel free to, cross-reference with the previous predictions from earlier in the year and decide for yourself. Are we blowing smoke? Or are we trying to send a smoke signal?
We won't get everything right. That's
course.
clear. I don't think we did in the last prediction. Some things, like the ones that I mentioned, were real standouts, though. And we will see what happens. And hopefully, maybe at the start of next year, we'll recap this one and see how we did.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah. All right.
All right. So once again, that question, natural disasters, what may be in store for the U.S. through the end of this year?
Well, we got the Knight of Wands reversed. That's interesting to me. It's going to be Wands. This is interesting. The Six of Wands is also reversed. The Ten of Swords is reversed.
Okay.
A lot of recovery efforts. Oh my goodness. And you know what I'm looking at here? The first thing that stands out to me is all the wands. And the wands can be fire energy, right? So I have a feeling that wildfires are going to start picking up soon in the U.S. I haven't heard about it. That doesn't mean there aren't any right now, but it hasn't been a news item. The tornadoes, the other wind events, and the flooding events are what's happened. But drought and fire. For example, I'm not sure if it's Utah, there's been reports out that Utah has been asking their people to pray more for rain because it's been like a huge drought going on there right now. The land is parched.
I like the way you pulled the idea of drier, fiery environments into this, and it's a natural because almost every year it seems like the rate of wildfires and inadvertent firestorms is growing. To me, with a Knight, which is about comings or goings, could also pertain to the idea too that I hate to say this, but that there's a level of fear and or cowardness in terms of how we might be applying solutions to solving this. I know it's not in the germane.
No, it's not. But that's okay. I'm glad you brought it up.
You nipped me in the bud.
I'm nipping you in the bud because guess what else I see here?
What do you see there?
I wonder if you see this too. Of course, what comes with the heat waves and the dryness and all the heat and the intense humidity that some of the big cities are happening, and people who may not have the means to keep themselves cool, there may be a lot more deaths this summer due to the heat waves. So, I think we're just getting into some of this right now, this kind of weather. And also, being that I'm a weather geek, that's why I think this is more my thing than yours. Okay. My apology. But when you think about the patterns of heat and the volatility that can bring, that can cause lightning and thunder. And the lightning, of course, sparks the wildfires. And the major heavy storms that we're seeing can be caused by all this volatility in the weather patterns. And so we can expect more storms, we can expect more wind events, and we can expect more wildfires due to all of this and damage from those darn storms and tornadoes.
It almost sounds like the planet is trying to cool itself off.
So that being said here, yes, that's true. The planet, Mother Nature has a way of trying to balance itself out, which may not be to our advantage. And so when we look at this here and we look at that Ten of Swords reversed, I would just give you this, that does indicate to me that there is going to be a lot of recovery efforts going on, a lot of, insurance claims and recovery, or who's going to cover what. And that is what we're going to look at in the next reading. I think that's leading right into this. This may mean also, Mr. O, since you want to bring up some stuff related, but not necessarily to solutions or if there's going to be any. A lot of people get more hot-headed and angry in weather like this. It affects our moods. It affects us. We get irritated. We get angry, possibly with one another, possibly with our government. There's nothing to be gained here. And also, as we can see, like you said, and you might have even seen here, there is little support to change the status quo right now, which is crazy.
Right. It seems like that's one way of looking at that card. I also feel too like this could be saying that those who do try to work for that, they're not being noticed that for those who are trying to do bring attention to what these problems are. And so it's very much not a winning proposition.
So the part two of this is, what will government support look like for victims of natural disasters in the U.S.? I guess going to be curious about this one. We have temperance, upright. We have the Six of Cups, reversed. And we have the Seven of Pentacles, reversed. Some
Some things
interesting
look hopeful,
cards here.
some things don't.
Well,
Maybe.
yeah, maybe. I think that it's going to balance out, hopefully. And what by that, I hope what this means is that, say, blue states aren't going to get more help than red states aren't going to get more help than blue, that this is going to be evenly balanced support or a lack thereof, that it's going to be equal all the way around. I'd like to think that you know, maybe things will balance out. Maybe they will realize that they can't. It's bad for the economy to leave cities decimated, isn't it? It's bad for business to have people floundering around with no support, I would think.
I think we're going to stick with the idea that at some point, somehow, some way, government support will be the moderating influence. It may not be as helpful as we would want it to be, but it may be able to bring some sense of normality, to these situations.
Because maybe, even if they can't, and nobody can agree that it's climate change we have to do or whatever, but maybe people are starting to realize that the old ways are not working anymore. That something's going to have to change and we're going to have to find a way to deal with the situation differently.
I like that. I think that's a very interesting idea there. The idea really is that the traditional methods need to be updated, need to be revamped, and that maybe we find what works in the past doesn't work anymore. It doesn't mean it has to be thrown out entirely, but we do need to find new solutions.
I do worry about the Seven of Pentacles reversed here, though, because thinking about that, I worry to myself that, maybe people will not be able to get enough support to rebuild. Maybe they're going to have to move on. Maybe we're going to see migrations away from some of the states that are seeing much of the climate issues and to other states that seem a little bit more balanced right now or are better capable of taking care of their people during these emergencies. I can see some of this going on, and maybe that will happen before somebody realizes, uh-oh, we better do this because people are starting to walk away from our communities.
Right, and we're seeing, maybe in a state I'm not going to mention that they're literally bankrupt with because of certain, protocols that have been enacted. The two preceding cards seem to mitigate the idea here, or help mitigate that things will take a while to get back to normal, but it's a process, and so this process may go beyond the end of the year for sure.
We have to either get back to work on this, or if we let it go, we may suffer some consequences here. So,
And that's a tall order because most of America's infrastructure is very old, especially in cities, but certainly probably in rural areas too.
well, that was interesting, Reed. Let's move on.
All right, so then we are now on question 4. What will the effects be of the U.S.'s current policy towards immigrants and undocumented in our nation?
I think you shuffle first.
All right,
Yeah.
there's a follow-up question to that.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. There definitely will be a follow-up question to this one, but we're going to look at the whole current policy and what's happening right now. And see what stands out here. Well, it was nice to see temperance come up in that previous reading there, I have to say. Okay.
All right, that question again. What will be the effects of the U.S. current policy towards undocumented immigrants in our nation?
And immigrants.
And immigrants.
The Two of Swords is reversed. The Eight of Cups is also reversed. Isn't that ironic? And, wow, Justice is upright. I haven't seen justice in this situation really played out yet, but let's take a look at this.
Well, the Two of Swords reverse may very well be indicating that some movement is going to happen that maybe says a decision should be reached or a decision should be found and begun to change the process.
I don't know. I'm not looking at it that way. And the reason why is because I almost felt when I saw the Two of Swords reversed, it's like they're going to keep moving them out. They're going to keep moving them. I feel movement here. And then the other thing about it is their decision is based on staying the course. They're staying the course because of that Eight of Cups. I can't help but put those two cards together here.
Yeah, see, I was looking at it maybe from the immigrants' point of view, thinking that second card showed they're staying.
The battle for justice continues. That's what I'm getting out of this reading. It's really kind of cut and dry for me. But I would also say here that
A blindfolded figure is justice too.
They feel right. They feel justified, in what they're doing. But others are fighting what they feel is injustice. They're fighting for justice for the immigrant and the undocumented population. And it may be possible that there may be some legal ramifications, in regards to this, that they will have to adhere to more than they are. But it may stop some of the real excessive stuff because, as we know, and anybody who denies this really needs a reality check. You really need a reality check if you deny this. I'm just saying it. But they are taking more people out than just hardened criminals. They've expanded that to say, well, if you're here without papers, even if you're in the process of getting papers and you're doing things legally, you're illegal. But how is that illegal? How is that illegal? You need a reality check. So it's gone too far, but that's why we see that people will still be fighting for justice.
All right, let's move to part two.
Sorry, little hard line on that.
Part two. Didn't you want to leave those out for part two?
I did.
Sorry about that.
You're right.
So part two of this question says,
Super.
What reactions or repercussions worldwide will there be towards the way this country is treating immigrants and the undocumented in this country?
Because when they're building things like an alligator Alcatraz and not caring if immigrants get eaten by alligators or flooded out, there could be human rights violations.
They're ignoring court commands to bring certain people that were illegally taken out of these prisons, and they're ignoring that.
Now, it's been pretty quiet internationally right now, but how long will that continue? We want to check. Well, we got the Queen of Pentacles reversed here. I've got some thoughts on that already. We've got the Knight of Cups reversed. Wow.
All court cards.
Oh my gosh.
Could almost be
The Queen of
proxies
Swords
for
reversed.
nations or nations actors.
This is really wild, but I don't see anything good here coming from the world. And let me explain why. I mean, okay, so what reactions or repercussions? Number one, they're not happy about what we're doing. I think that's a given. They feel this is bad all the way around and that we are going to suffer. Maybe there will be sanctions. I can't rule it out, but I'm not feeling it. I'm feeling here that they're not going to make the right decisions about this. So let me go through what I think is happening here. They're not happy about this at all. They're aghast, I would think. Their hearts are broken with what they see going on here. But the Queen of Pentacles is reversed here. And I'm kind of thinking that they're concerned about what the U.S. might do to them economically or otherwise to support them if they do something to stop this. And I want to say that's a very bad decision to counter this. It's not the right decisions that they're making here.
I don't know that I can address the card specifically other than indicating really what we are doing with these folks, no matter how we look at it, totally illegal or whatever it is. It's a human rights violation. We should be answering to or working with the U.S. or the United Nations to restore law and order to this situation.
You know how they have, I just want to interject this though. You know how they have peacekeepers come in and go into certain countries to keep the peace? Or they have nuclear people to go into Iran to check on what they're doing with their nuclear energy? Why don't we have, they won't even let our congressmen take a look at how the people are being treated in these places. That's scary.
So another way of thinking about what the world, where is that? Reactions more than repercussions could be saying that they feel we have absented the world or that we're perverting the world. We're against Mother Nature in a way. And it's not just about the immigrants, but clearly, people should be treated the way we are treating them. They are very unhappy. And to me, this almost implies the sense of wanting to find a decision that they will find regardless of how we may feel about it. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to challenge us legally. I don't know what it
They
means.
may treat us harshly.
They may treat us
They may treat us harshly. If you're traveling overseas, people might be upset. But I don't sense here they're making the right decisions. Maybe they're confused about what their power is in this situation or can be, because when it comes down to it, everything revolves around money and support.
And that's the Queen of Pentacles. So, alrighty. So that was very illuminating.
Card number 5, as we're winding down now. We have no more part 2s coming. So the next one is going to be, I think it's your shuffle again, will there be an uptick in political, racial, or ethnic violence in the U.S.? And when I say political, we just had people assassinated in Minnesota, because they were Democrats and against somebody's religious or religio-political beliefs. Because even though we're supposed to keep religion out of politics, there it is. So let's take a look at this. And I guess I could throw in religious violence as well. So you get the idea here.
There's a realistic feeling that, some form of Christian nationalism was involved with the person in that assassination who did that or who has allegedly done that. And Christian nationalism has kind of manipulated or hypnotized certain people, the MAGA type people, into believing that our government has to be a Christian government that reflects the Christian principles, but mostly the ones that they say, which happen to be very little, if anything, that Jesus said. They only go to the Old Testament, which is very much about punishment of wrongdoers, quote unquote. So, once again, will there be an uptick in political, racial, or ethnic violence Possibly religious violence. It's the king.
No, it's
Tonight.
not. It's the Knight of Cups. The Knight of Cups is upright. That's good to see. Ah, the Queen of Swords. The Queen of Swords is upright.
We had these last time. Did we not shuffle well?
We both shuffled.
I know.
We have the King of Pentacles upright.
Well, they are upright this time.
Well, I could see a positive and a negative here.
Sure.
I think, even though they're upright, because on one hand, I do feel here that maybe cooler heads will prevail. You know, that people don't want violence. People don't want to get violent. So maybe they'll make just and wise decisions and choices thinking this through. You know, that there are other ways to deal with, you know, the problems that we are facing in this country. And we'll be showing a little bit more self-control perhaps in these matters. But on the other hand, I can't help but wonder if the violence will be controlled by laws enacted that will stifle and suppress, you know, people from acting out, peaceful protesters. But I'm hoping that is not the case here.
Well, when I look at what you just said about those last two cards, then this sort of says, like, if you love your country, you know, this is like the propaganda saying, like, love your country, or we're going to overmanage you. But another thought that I have was that maybe this card is suggesting that the appeal to those of us who do really love our country, despite what's going on in the government, in politics, and in the world culture, etc., that maybe this is how we are reacting to that. We love our country so much. Maybe we have
to follow the laws and remain in control.
Yes, maybe
of ourselves.
Well, maybe we have to make a very informed decision, and that's something that, you know, we don't necessarily believe everyone here can do.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because, you know, a lot of people want to fight fire with fire right now. And, you know, they believe that we're just being bulldozed over by people who want violence and want to hurt people, like the immigrants, and it won't stop there. Let's face that. It won't stop there. So the thing is that because we already had a president who said, I hate Democrats. What does that mean? And what does that inspire? What does hatred like that inspire? So it's really unnerving, but I do think maybe things will be a little bit calmer from here till the end of the year.
It kind of looks that way. That King of Pentacles down there maybe suggests that somebody, you know, says we have a common welfare to try to support, and that means, you know, taking care of it. That means managing it well. And, you know, if there's a clue there, maybe it's saying looking at it a little bit more abstractly as the world, the instinctual world, that animal there, you know, let wisdom come in from all sources, not just one.
Yeah. All right. Well,
we're going to move on to number 6.
Number 6 is, will the U.S. start supporting Ukraine again in their war against Russia? They haven't been sending them the munitions and the supplies they've been asking for. It seems like even though Ukraine signed a mineral rights thing with us, the U.S. has not done their part. Yeah, you shuffle. No, I shuffled through this time. You're right. And the U.S. has been going soft on Russia, looking the other way on some things and maybe saying a few things like, oh, Putin is very, very bad, but it's not helping. So, you know. Great. Shuffle. And then we have one quick yes/no question, and we're done. Yeah, we did have 2 cards we had before, but they were just meant to be. We haven't had many other repeats, I don't think.
Well, they were right in a row the first time
Yeah,
too,
true.
but reversed.
Yeah.
So it felt like maybe they just got stuck together.
Actually, they were upright because that was a good reading. So
No, they were reversed.
they were reversed. Okay. Starting Ukraine. Okay, well, we've got the Queen of Cups here upright. We have the Lovers reversed. We have the Devil reversed. What do you think?
Well, the Devil reversed is about casting off oppression, releasing what binds you, perhaps, and thinking.
But is that the U.S. wanting to be released from the
Let me look at
Ukraine
that.
obligation? Sure.
Maybe they're going to bail. Could that be the U.S. bailing? I'm not entirely sure that's that.
Well, I don't know. When I look at the Lovers reversed, I can't say we're going to make necessarily the right decision here. There's a temptation to do something unethical or inhumane, maybe, to just leave the situation, let it go, and let the devil get its due. I don't know here. I feel like there's liberation, but for who? Is it for Russia or is it for Ukraine? Is it for the U.S.?
Does the Queen sort of denote a more emotional based logic or attempt at finding the solution based more on emotional things?
I think there's an attempt, I almost wonder here if I see something twofold with that Queen of Cups. On the one hand, I can see Ukraine trying to do their best to appease Trump and work with Trump to try to get the help they need. And then on the other hand, I see Trump trying to do his darndest to talk Putin into toning it down a bit, to try to get a ceasefire, to try to get them back to the negotiating table and stuff like that. But I feel here that the decisions being made aren't necessarily in Ukraine's best interest, because this was about what we were going to do for Ukraine. And I think it's not in their best interest.
So it almost sounds like somebody tries to appeal for emotional calmness on a decision that probably really will give up something that they don't want to give up necessarily.
And I think here in my scenario, the devil reversed is Ukraine moving on to get more support from the European Union and other NATO allies.
Oh, that's a very interesting take.
Yeah.
Do we need the bottom card?
No, I think that's it.
Okay.
I mean, unless you think you need it, because do you want me to look?
No, that's fine.
Okay. I don't want to look. I think that's it.
The question in my mind was that really the Ukraine turning to Europe or EU or NATO or someone else.
So will the U.S. started supporting? I'm saying, if this were a yes-no question, I would say most likely no, but not definitely no because of this Queen of Cups. But I would also say we've got two reversed major arcana here. And even though the devil speaks of liberation, we have to take it into context with the question. And I get the feeling Ukraine is going to have to walk away from the U.S. and seek their support elsewhere. That's just what I feel.
Well, given what we do know of the political stuff going on, that seems
the deciding factor is the Lovers. First off, is this doing this in Ukraine's best interests? Maybe not, but they may have very little options here. Is the U.S. making the right decisions by not throwing their support at Ukraine? Not likely. So that's the key to me right there.
I think you got it.
So let's move on. Finally.
We're on our last question.
And this one is,
a yes or no.
Will the people in the U.S. on all sides tone down the rhetoric and start working together again by year's end?
And what kind of yes or no are we doing?
We're doing our old school yes no.
The old school.
Me first.
And that means we'll be right about an hour long with this presentation. We're not sure if we'll divided in halves or not. I think.
I think we'll put it out because we'll have a timestamp. Not everybody might be interested in seeing all of this.
Or you can just watch what you want first and then catch up with the rest later if you want.
Maybe you want to skip the recap from last time. So whatever works. It might be hard for you to upload, though.
I'll figure it out.
All right. Well, one might ask the question, were we ever really working together? There certainly was a time where we all could get along and find common ground on more issues than not. But, you know.
Right, after we're attacked, Pearl Harbor or...
Oh, come on. Even in a more recent times.
If you think, though.
I would say, though, pre 9/11, I would have to say, though. All right. Here I go. I'm going to count cards out. Do you want to explain the yes/no?
Yes, I'll explain that. So basically, this was orally taught to me many, many years ago at the beginning of my tarot career. You basically flip over cards, counting to 13, unless you hit an ace. If you hit an ace, you stop there and move to a next pile. You only do 3 piles. So your max cards with no aces would be 39. That's probably not likely. Here's how you interpret it. Each ace doesn't necessarily have a meaning of the card's meaning. It just goes towards yes or no. So the more aces you have, the more likely it is yes. If you have 3, it's definite. 2, it's leaning that way. 1, it's not leaning that way. No aces means looks like no. So what do we got? We have
3
aces. This is nice.
It is nice. It's hard to believe at this point, but I'm looking at this and thinking to myself, as I see this, what it might mean is more and more people are going to find common ground on issues and things as the year goes on. So it might be that more people will be coming around to the fact that we have to get our act together. That's my first thought. And I have one other thought on this. And Mr. O, you might agree with this one because it's something you've brought up before. It may be that we have no choice but to get along with one another because some major event happens, whether we get embroiled in a war or whether we get embroiled in a huge natural disaster or something happens in the world that makes us all realize we have to come together.
I could agree with that. I don't know I necessarily feel that right now, but that sort of always plays to me that in the past it seems like national emergencies brought those who were divided towards each other. But I'm looking at the card and I'm feeling like the Ace of Cups sort of suggests that even though people don't have firm emotional feelings for each other, it lends to this idea, well, we're going to work across the aisle or across the neighborhood to do that. The Ace of Pentacles also upside down just suggests to me that this is a movement that really is spurred perhaps by the dis-ease with the economy and the fact that not everybody has level boats and that a lot of us are suffering strongly, and that these are the ideas or the conditions. This is more of a condition. I don't like them, but I'm broke too, and we got to fix it.
So do you want me to throw a wrench in things?
The bottom of the card?
You know, after I pulled the bottom of the card, I thought, well, maybe I should pull the top card too, because we really have no nuance to go on here. But let's take a look at the bottom card, shall we?
Uh-oh.
It's the Fool, upright. I think people realize that they have to do something outside of their comfort zone now to make some changes, some positive changes happen. May have to take a risk and, you know, abandon some of those deep-seated attitudes and beliefs that you have in order to create change.
We chose the Lightseers Tarot because of the beautiful imagery. This is a person who says, I'm just going to trust in this concept of trying to work with people, because that's what the question was about. I'm just going to put my trust there and hope for the best.
I'm going to want to pull the top card because it's perfect with this.
You've
And
already
why are we thinking this way? Why are we doing this? It could lead me to say a couple things. It's the Six of Swords upright. And so we're doing this. Why are we possibly coming together? Because conditions have been so bad. We want change. We want to move to calmer, better shores. We want things to be different now. And the thing is, this could spell what I said in the beginning, that it could be a major natural disaster that brings us around to this line of reasoning, or it could be the other thing I said, that maybe conditions just warrant it. We find now we don't like the trajectory of the way things are going in the U.S., that big bill that doesn't seem to be benefiting everybody. So we're deciding we have to coalesce together to turn this around.
Well, a lot of the card talks about finding a way over or past troubled waters. The old song, The Bridge Over Troubled Waters. Maybe the idea could be that we have to figure out how to work together, because we're not going to get away from these troubles on our own. That these things are so much bigger than our own concerns, petty or not so petty. We have to figure that out.
Well, thank you for that, because
and that still means that some people will be resistant to that.
Yeah. Thank you for that, because it does also indicate to me, yes, people realize that this inability to even talk to one another is not serving us well. We need to move away from that. We need to move away from that and try to calm things down, right? So, wow. Interesting reads. Well, do feel free to chime in on this. Yes, we inserted some of our own political beliefs in this, but we really adhered to what the cards had to say. And if you feel something different about this by any of these readings, by all means,
Leave a comment.
Constructively, that is. I don't want to hear you angry libtard or mean comments towards us. Constructive criticism is always welcome.
Right.
All right, everybody. Take care. Have a great 6 months ahead, and we'll see you hopefully again in January with a new world and U.S. prediction.
May your star be at peace.
Bye-bye for now.